Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Textile Talks. I'm Nancy Bavor, and I'm the director of the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles. And I'm excited to introduce 4 international artists participating in our current exhibition, Layered and Stitched, 50 Years of Innovative Art, which traces the history of the art quilt movement from the 1960s to today. And in a moment, we'll hear from Leslie Gabriëlse, who is in the Netherlands, from Charlotte Yde, who is in Denmark, from Jenny Hearn in South Africa, and from Mary Powell, who is in Canada. Textile Talks is a weekly virtual lecture series presented by 6 different fiber arts organizations each Wednesday. And those organizations include Studio Art Quilt Associates, the International Quilt Museum, Surface Design Association, the Modern Quilt Guild, Quilt Alliance, and of course, the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles. Today's presentation and Q&A will last about an hour. And so that we can continue to offer these talks for free, I hope you'll consider making a donation or by becoming a member of our museum. And we'll put a link in the chat shortly so you can visit the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles website. During today's presentation, please use the Q&A button for questions and the chat box for greeting others and the post-event survey for commentary and constructive feedback. And if you prefer not to see notifications from the chat, you can click on the chat button and toggle them off or on. And we respectfully ask that you be as courteous as you engage with the speakers, moderators, and other participants. We're going to change the format a little bit this week because we do have international artists and they are all in different time zones, as you could have gathered by their locations. And so I will take questions after each artist does their presentation about their work. So put your questions for each artist in the chat. If you have a general question, we can take those at the end if there's time. So we also want to thank our 2021 and 2022 Textile Talks sponsors who make this series free and accessible to audiences worldwide. Our sponsors include at the platinum level, Motive Fabrics and Supplies and Quilting Daily, sorry. At the silver level, Aurifil and eQuilter. At the bronze level, Artistic Artifacts, Clover, Empty Spool Seminars, Misty Fuse, Attached Ink, 9 Patch Fabrics, Quilt Mania, Schiffer Publishing, Thai Silks, and the Quilt Show. And I hope you'll patronize these generous sponsors. We couldn't do it without them. And for those of you near San Jose, California, we encourage you to come check out our new fall exhibitions, including Studio Art Quilt Associates traveling exhibition, Layered and Stitched, 50 Years of Innovative Art, as well as More Impact, Climate Change with Tapestry Weavers West, and our current artist in residence work with Bay Area artist Rebecca Herman and Mark Schaffner. These exhibitions will be open to the public during our regularly scheduled hours through January 2nd. And we're also excited to share the work of tapestry weaver and contemporary artist Tommy Scanlon in her virtual lecture on November 4th. To learn more about these exhibitions and coming events, please visit our website. So I have to say, I'm going to digress a little bit here from the plan script because I just want to say it gives me great personal and professional pleasure to welcome you here today. The 4 artists you will hear from are part of the SAQA traveling exhibition, Layered and Stitched, which is based on the 2018 book, Art Quilts Unfolding, 50 Years of Innovation, that I co-authored with Lisa Ellis, Martha Seelman, and Sandra Sider, who was also editor. And we also co-curated the exhibition now on view at the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles after it was postponed from 2020. After it closes in San Jose, it will also travel to the Dairy Barn in Ohio and to the International Quilt Museum in Lincoln. And I hope many of you have a chance to see it at one of these venues. So many of the works are from private collections, from the artists themselves, and from museums, and are unlikely to be seen altogether ever again. And now I'm totally delighted to introduce today's speakers who are joining us really from around the globe. Today we first welcome Leslie Gabriëlse from Rotterdam. Leslie's affinity for fabrics grew at the Art Academy in Rotterdam, and his most characteristic works skillfully combine various fabrics through an applique technique augmented by acrylic paint. And during the span of his long career, Leslie has completed numerous commissions, both private and commercial, and has exhibited his work extensively in Europe and North America. Next, we will be joined by Charlotte Yde, And Charlotte is one of the leading quilt makers in Denmark, and her work has also been featured in books, magazines, and quilt catalogs throughout Europe and the US. She began making quilts in 1978, and what you see on the screen here, I think, is one of her first quilts, and is in the exhibition Layered and Stitched. And she's become well-known internationally as a visiting quilt artist, teacher, and lecturer. Charlotte's work is inspired by her surroundings, by the places she visits, and by cultural artifacts from the past. She continuously experiments with form, color, fabrics, and techniques, almost always working in a series that develops ideas of relationships and differences. And after Charlotte, we will hear from Jenny Hearn, who is in Johannesburg, South Africa. She's an accomplished artist, quilter, curator, quilt judge, and member of Fiberworks and Studio Art Quilt Associates. And in the fiber art field, she studies extensively and has exhibited in both national and international shows. She has works in the permanent collections of the Mad Gallery in New York, the International Quilt Museum in Lincoln, and the Marbaum collection at the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles. It's wonderful to have her work in our collection. And her quilts have been sold both to private collectors and corporate collectors. And finally, we'll hear from Mary Powell. Mary is a Canadian fiber artist, best known for her cheesecloth portraits, which you see one on the screen here. And her work has been exhibited internationally, purchased for private and museum collections throughout North America, as well as published in numerous books and magazines, and featured on television. For over 40 years, she has enjoyed teaching, and for the past decade in sharing her passion for textile art with students all over the world. She's a juried artist member and former board member of Studio Art Quilt Associates, and she's an enthusiastic promoter of the fiber art movement. As you can see, we have an all-star cast this week. It's great, so exciting. We're thrilled to display these artists' work at the museum, and so excited to have all of you here today. And so we will start with Leslie, and I'll just remind the artists we're going to have about 8 minutes of presentation, some Q&A afterwards, and then we'll go on to the next artist. So take it away, Leslie. Leslie is, by the way, on his phone for the voice, and then we will be showing his images.
Hello, everyone. Nancy and Martha Steelman in particular, thank you so much for all the attention you gave me and being here on the couch of my great friends from California. And they bought this piece actually a couple of years ago, and I was thrilled because of its size, connecting to the couch size as well. So I'm sort of giggling here and felt very special. Next. Okay, now on the left side, one sees a man doing its utmost thanks to the lady next to him, because yes, you know, she's really her creation. And wow, I lost my letters and text. Anyway, the thing is, these are already made in, what was it? 1967. And I used a lot of paint and hand sewn with yarn, and had a lot of fun with this man. You know, he is really into this guy, this girl. So, and on the other hand, you see the sunbathing. It's like what you do if you are on the beach and on a flat and you doze off and you start dreaming somewhat, and then a couple of things occur to you and overwhelms you with you know, fun things. So that is mainly the topic in this case. Some devilish things as well. Okay, now we are here by masks. These are actually the chicken and the frog and the dog. These are actually, I had those as collection, and they are from papier mâché, made of and used for carnivals, etc., etc. And the MOM stands for mombakkers masks. So you can see they all dressed up and sort of performing on stage, and all hand sewn and added. Oh yeah, the thing is that those masks actually are lino cuts printed on fabric and added to the whole image. Okay. Next, watching the television and seeing the golf tournament, and I'm not a golfer, but the thing is that I really was impressed by the images and the surroundings. And the only thing is that when I put a number on the flag, I figured, yeah, what shall I do? 7, 13, 12 or whatever. I said, no, let's do 19, take your pick. Anyway, when I finished the piece, someone tapped me on my shoulder and said, listen, you know what 19 means? I said, no, not at all. He said, well, that's the canteen, actually. He said, oh boy, I like that place. I like that much better than outdoors and, even in the winter time. So that's basically the whole affair about this piece. And it's the name sake, the 19th hole. And it's rather size-wise, it's like 7 feet high by 9 feet width. Okay, next, please. Here, wow, that was an entrance hall. I had a commission about this, and actually there are 9 wooden panels. And what I did here was depicted stories from travels and having fun. At the end, at the right part, you see then a sailing boat and a couple waving to the guy holding the stem, Anyway, and then the detail on the right side, you can actually see its size. And the thing is that I added pieces of wood as well, and I covered those with fabric. And so therefore it gets an applique technique added to it. So it became sort of fun to make as well. So very nice and still around. I made it in 1998. So, and the size is actually, if you like to see it, to know, it's like 9 feet high by 32 feet wide. Ooh, okay, next. Oh yeah, that's the end, obviously. Star. How come the name Star ended up like, because I bought one time a little quilt star-like thing at an antique market, and then Penny Nee, she was actually the commissioner who asked me to make a piece in a square, like she asked for several other artists as well. And Michael James, for instance, Joan Schulz, I guess. So that was nice because Joan Schulz, I met her in San Francisco, and then I met Penny Nee. And so we ended up making this particular commission with one other title instead of Star is like the Wallflower. And the couple at the end, at the far end, are in a bar, and I made that drawing a sketch from sitting in a bar somewhere in Venice, California. Oh, all hand stitched and added here and there some paint, acrylic paint to emphasize the shape of it. Okay, yeah, right. Had a lot of fun. Oh, we're not done yet. Great, great, great. Thank you. That's me and you, number 1. And that's mostly influenced by the Mexican atmosphere and travels, and a lot of fun by all those articles that are just floating around and emphasizes the travel and the fancy things. And then the household at the base, that's then the jelly, the mold. And in the middle, teeny weeny, a couple in a boat, rolling, having fun, romantic as can be. And on the right, you have the ocean life. That's I have a piece of paper here. Ocean Life, well, that's like 50 inch by 49 inch wide. So that's the one you saw me already in front of it on the couch. And this piece actually, you know, it's also influenced by another piece I made earlier that was a coral reef. And I figured, well, I like to continue this topic and underwater thing. And yeah, what a lot of fun. And on my YouTube, you can see sort of movie where you can see how I started and developed the whole piece from start to the finish. Also a lot of fun and colorful and joyful. That's basically what I have in mind. Each morning when I wake up, I said, oh boy, it's another day. Some more colors around me. And I'm really having fun. Thank you so much. Enjoy it. Next, please. Is there some more, or is it the end of story and not
End of story. End of story. Sorry.
Okay, end of story. Yes, what I wanted
That
to
was
know.
fabulous.
That's what I said. Okay,
That
thank
was
you.
fabulous. No, we have a couple of questions. And one of them came in late, but I would like for you to talk a little bit, because what I want to say, when I first became aware of Leslie and talking with him and learning about his work, I think what stunned me is he was doing these extraordinarily creative painting with fabric works in the 60s. And tell us a little bit about the Academy of Art in Rotterdam, because you mentioned that fabrics and surface design was all part painting. It was not separated.
You fell down. You still connected?
Yes, yes. So tell us a little bit about your
I lost
art.
it here.
Oh. Can you hear me now, Leslie? Leslie, are you still on the phone? Well, I will tell you while we wait for Leslie to come back. What he told me is when he was in the 60s at the Academy of Art, he was really exposed to a variety of media. And I think this is one thing that is really interesting about many of the early quilt artists, is they were professionally trained artists, but somehow fabric just called to him. And he has been working in this style since the late 60s. And he said he wasn't aware of the art quilt movement until he, quote, I put that in quotes, until he came to the US in the 80s, and didn't realize that there were other artists who were also working like this. We'll talk to him about how he works on pieces of this size and how he frames them and that sort of thing. But then there was one question about the star. Oh, good, Leslie's maybe back. The series that he mentioned, the collector Penny Nee, and she commissioned about 12 works by her favorite artists that were 4 feet by 4 feet. And I'm pleased to say that those are in the collection of the San Jose Museum of Quilts, as are some of Leslie's early works from the 60s. Leslie, you're back?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry that I just, fell from Earth or something.
I hope not.
No, you mentioned about the early start. That's at the moment that you start to ask me about the Academy of Art in Rotterdam at the time, and actually dealing with fabric, that was one of the topics you can do at the school itself. And I prefer to work with the textile because it's tactile as well, and you can fool around with this, and that's anyway, it's dry, and instead of working with oil paint that's muddy and watery, and it takes time to dry up, and therefore I said, I lose my intention and to working on one piece. I'd rather finish it, because if I put it aside and start a new one, then I forgot to think that the former one would be still interesting. So therefore, I'd rather stick to it and finish it. And that fabric was then the the medium I could use better than
Wonderful.
paint.
Great. Thank you so much. All right,
Oh.
next we're going to turn to Charlotte. And so we will have a transition here. And I do encourage everyone, the Ocean Life YouTube video of Leslie creating that work. It is about 8 feet long, and it's quite remarkable to watch his working style. So, Charlotte.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. And here we are. It has been very strange to be represented by exactly this quilt, because it is actually my very first quilt. And you would want to, if you had a traveling exhibition like this, it would have been nice to have a new one also. But anyway, I started making quilts back in '78, as you said, and I always knew that I was not going to be a traditional quilter. We don't have a tradition in Denmark, so I wasn't burdened by tradition. I could do whatever I wanted to. So I was designing this on graph paper, and my husband was studying to become an architect. So, and we have always been very fond of and aware of Scandinavian design, Danish design. So I thought I wanted to do something simple as what we're known for here in Scandinavia. So that was what I did. The black and white flying geese are my homage to traditional quilts, because I had to read a lot of books because I couldn't go anywhere to learn it. I had studied art history for a couple of years, and then I took a textile, mostly embroidery education, but I ended up loving to make quilts, really, and I even ended up loving to do everything on the sewing machine. So for the first couple of years, I made abstract quilts like this. This one, the big one is hand quilted, and the small ones are machine quilted. So I started machine quilting very early in my life. Very naughty, was not well looked at that time, but anyway, that was what I wanted to do. Then I'm going to show you briefly through some of the techniques that led to where I am now. So, well, then I moved on and did a series of quilts based on old Danish artifacts like the Stone Age knives and things like that. Back then I did occasionally make a sketch, but normally I just work intuitively with the fabrics, but here in this case there was kind of a sketch for it. Then I had a long love affair with metallic silk organza, which is the shiny stuff here and here. And I started buying half a meter or a meter of that fabric. I had no idea why I was doing that, what I was going to use it for. But in the end, I ended up doing things like cutting it up. And it's not like what was also very fashionable at that time, making chenille. This is a different kind of layering. And I think I was the only one who did that at that time. But it's about layering, and I'm trying to cut away some of the layers in a way so that it looks as if it's worn away, the fabric, not just cut through. So you can see I have all these bridges of the silk metallic organza. You know, you buy this really expensive fabric and then you cut most of it away. Very sensible to do. I worked with this technique for, I think, almost 10 years in different ways. So this is another way of working with it. This quilt is called Europe is Bleeding, because it was made in 2000, where we had all the horrible wars in the Balkan and Eastern Europe area. So that's why the pattern, the design here dissolves itself into I quilted two skeletons up here, and the pattern is slowly disintegrating here. And that's a detail of it. So you can see I cut an awful lot of the gold metallic away. And this is a Viking. I come from Scandinavia, so of course I had at a certain time to make a piece with Viking. And here I've used the same technique, just with a lot of different fabrics to make it kind of look old and worn, and as if it has been covered with leaf gold perhaps, and been in the earth and worn away. There's a skeleton.
Charlotte, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Could you slide down on your screen? I think we're still seeing Steen's quilt from 1978.
What? I'm not. But what do I do then? What do I do? Because I'm seeing what I'm talking about. What are you seeing now?
Oh, now we are.
Yeah, it moved now. So I think this is great.
That is very strange, because it looked perfectly okay here. Well, anyway, you just have to imagine all the other things I talked, because I don't think I have time to go back unless I get some more minutes.
Why don't you, Charlotte, go back to your first quilt. Just show us what we've missed. What was between this and Steen's quilt? Ah, wonderful.
And this is what I did for a couple of years. I thought I was going to be an abstract quilt maker, and I ended up being somebody who always had something to say with the quilt. So you don't always know yourself enough. So these are the things I was talking about. With the technique with the metallic organza. They're all machine quilted also. Then in 2012, roughly 11-12, I started doing digitally designed machine embroidery. I also work as a graphic designer, so I loved my computer just as much as I loved my sewing machine. And suddenly the two of them could get together and do amazing work. So this is from a series, just two of them, that's called White Things Stitched in Black. And you can see on these ones, I also did a lot of deconstructed screen printing, as you can see on these two pieces, and the machine embroidered sunflowers here. This is Winterfield and Springfield. I also did an awful lot of portraits. Do you see what I'm doing now? Sorry, do you see the portraits? I hope you do.
Yes, we see it.
Yeah, okay. So I was really exercising how to get the most out of that sewing machine program, so that I could, start from a blank paper or a blank screen and make my own things. And that led to this series where I was investigating what clothing could do to different people, and also trying to depict the folds and everything just with black thread on white fabric. And again, a deconstructed piece. This is kind of the same here. I'm trying to show how different you can use the fabric or the clothes to either hide yourself or to kind of reveal your body, as these Greek and Roman statues really does. Then these are new pieces, and they're actually dealing with loss in my life, and the boats are my way of saying goodbye to relatives. They are double layered silk organza, and they're discharge printed and machine embroidered. And this is my dining room where I'm sitting here now, so that I use as a printing table. Very posh studio, isn't it? It's the only place I can print, really. And this is from the same series, and it's called Traces of Lost Soul. So it's dealing with the same. It got sold very quickly to a woman who knew exactly what it was about. So that was kind of very moving for me. And I made some little 3-dimensional boats to go with it. And then I had, because it was sold very early in a touring exhibition with the group Quilt Art that I'm a member of, I had to make a replacement. So that was a replacement. And you see, this is one side of it and this is the other side. So you can see the black boats here are casting shadows here. The white boats are, you can see as faint shadows here. And this is the last piece I've done, big sail. So I think I'm on a sail trip on a boat mission here. The only reason I took this picture is because it shows you the size. It's relatively big, very difficult to handle with all this silk organza, completely transparent. But yeah, that's me. Taking too much time.
No, you're fine. That's a wonderful, what a wonderful journey. It was, I'm sorry we had to go by the slides we missed so quickly, but what a journey it's been. And, you know, I think, so my question when I saw you going from the large format quilts to the delicate little portraits, how much of that was artistic and how much was it technology that you got a machine that could do that, or was it just something you wanted to try?
It was both really, because I do like technology. I also like to be good at doing things. And when I started making the portraits, I thought, well, when I wanted to learn to be good at drawing, I would sit with my pencil or my charcoal and draw black and white. I thought I'm going to do the same with the thread. I hadn't realized that it's much more difficult with a thread that has one thickness, whereas with a pencil you can press lightly or hard, and you can have a sharp point or a blunt point, and so it's a bit more difficult really. But I as I said, I love my computer as much, so I love sitting there nerding with stuff like that too. And of course, my poor family was victims of that.
What a fascinating journey. Thank you. Thank you so much, Charlotte. Okay, and now we're going to turn to Jenny Hearn from Johannesburg.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
And we can see you.
Oh, good. Well, okay, you want me to start my video. Let me do that. But thank you very much for inviting me to be amongst such prestigious people. Wow, I've been incredibly impressed. Because we're really at the back of beyond here in South Africa, although we do have a wonderful series of art groups. My video is coming on slowly. We do have art groups. We have an excellent traditional group, and we have our wonderful fiber arts group, which is, well, we exhibit all over the world. We've had a girl who used to take our work everywhere. I just need to get this thing started. I'm looking for slideshow. Come on. No, I don't want animations. It's just not opening. Come on. Can you see this so far? Which is tiny.
No, Jenny, you'll need to come back to the Zoom window and share your screen.
I come back to my Zoom window. Here we are, the green one at the bottom. Share screen. Here we go. Right. Right? Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Yes?
Mm-hmm. Now do play slideshow. So we see it full screen.
Find slideshow is not appearing. Oh, goodness me. When you've practiced this so often. Here we go. Slideshow from the beginning. There we go. All right.
Perfect.
So this was actually my second quilt, because my first quilt was not judged in the first exhibition we had called Quilt Safari, because it didn't follow the format of quilting, as in a rectangular or square format with a proper backing and batting and binding and edging and all of that sort of stuff. And it had tails hanging from it. So if you can imagine, it was like this, and then it had long leaf things hanging from the bottom. So it wasn't even judged. But I like to use embroidery. It's the sort of thing that I do when I'm sitting talking to people, or where I'm on TV or something like that, because I cannot sit with nothing in my hands. So this started with an embroidery of leaves. My mother was a great embroiderer, and she had given me a whole lot of canvases that had set designs on it. And they were all sorts of experimental embroidery. This was in the, well, this would be the 60s. And so I played around and played around. I don't think you can see all that detail here. And then I added all these leaves to it and petals and so on. And it's set on dark blue velvet at the back. And then this is the snow, because it's to represent the Olympics at the, where was it? In Lillehammer, and which is in Norway. And so this was my expression of what it was like having seen that opening ceremony. And obviously working in blues and greens in the analogous colors, it works very well. It's very simple and very easy to work. And then I went on to doing a whole lot with flowers. One of the first quilts I ever did was a sort of bargello, and I had to learn from books because I didn't know any teachers at that stage. And then my husband gave me a trip to the Cape where there was one of the festivals, and there I met these wonderful artists who were doing the most exciting things. And I thought, this is where I want to be. And the thing is that they were always so helpful. You don't know how to do this? Let me help you. It's quite difficult in the art world because if people have got a technique they don't want to share. Quilters share. Anyway, so I went and did a whole lot of flower things. I did this Bargello thing with the puffiest batting I could find. I thought I was very proud of it, actually. But then I realized that, there's a whole lot more to quilting. So I love doing flowers. I'm very fond of Japanese art. I have done a lot of classes with people and got all the books that I possibly could at the time. Unfortunately, we don't seem to have very many books now. So this is part of my kimono series, well, part of my flower series, really, because just making these little flowers is so therapeutic. Using silks and satins and, as Charlotte said, buying all these expensive materials and not knowing what on earth you're going to do with them. But just the fact that you're collecting them and you're feeling them and you're touching them. And I'm a great collector of all sorts of things that give me inspiration. And this was called Lakeside because I don't know where I'd been, somewhere I think in the States, and seen these wonderful lakes with these plants and flowers growing out of them. And that's my inspiration, because I will find a phrase or a word that clicks something with me. This is the medium and the message. This piece was based on Marshall McLuhan's book, The Medium is the Message, because I was studying library science at the time. And he states that society learns more by the nature by which men communicate rather than the communication. So this one has runes in it. It has all sorts of little pictograph signs. This is a newspaper with flashes, news flashes in it, and also it indicates the a film, if you like, as it comes in those little squares. And I play with color because I have thousands and thousands of little squares of 2-inch fabrics kept in pizza boxes, clean pizza boxes, I have to say. And then I give myself the challenge of getting from one side to the other side, changing the color in between. And you can see how these little squares work. Sometimes it doesn't always work. And very often I put little pieces, squares of embroidery into them. Embroidery is always part of my work. These are little embroidered pieces as well. And what I found interesting about this one was that just after 9/11, a friend of mine saw this and said, "You are depicting 9/11 by this quilt." And that's what I enjoy is if somebody then reads the quilt in a different way and gets their own inspiration out of it, and then they're really conversing with the quilt and finding their own medium. This one is Ice on Thin Ice, and it was inspired by Paul Nicklin, who's a Geographic Society photographic correspondent, and he wrote, "Ice on the run, seas on the rise." So this was my little phrase that got me going on this one. And it's always made up of several layers. So this was my original pieced work, and then I cut it up. And then I have to add pieces because I tried to follow the lines of the embroidery that I've set up here, but it doesn't always work. So I have to do layering. So it becomes quite thick. But then you can look through those layers and make your own interpretation of what is actually going on. This is another one. I think this one is a little bit more successful because it's the one that's actually behind me, if you can see there. Because you can really see the move of the glaciers melting into these little fragments down here and pushing the sea into places unknown, which is going to cause flooding and damage of crops and animal life and that sort of thing. Because ecology is one of the subjects that I try to illustrate. And my work is actually quite intuitive because I'll think of a title, I'll have an idea in my mind what I'm going to do. But by the time I've got all the fabrics out and played with my little squares and things, it's very often not quite what I envisaged in the first place. But this one is Igoli, Place of Gold, which is the indigenous name for Johannesburg in 1886 when the reefs were first surveyed. And the Witwatersrand gold rush led to the development of Johannesburg, and it was the greatest gold seams or set of seams for that time. I'm not sure, I haven't done any geography surveying since then, but anyway, we're quite proud of the fact. So fortune seekers from all over the world came, and the town was originally called Ferreirstown. And people made a lot of money out of it, and they were known as the Randlords. And this beautiful city was built based on this precious metal. And it was apparently it's a very huge arc of gold. And this, because it's so deep, it's very difficult to mine. So this shows the stopes and the strata that they had to go down in order to get their rich mining. And this indicates the population we have in this country. Again, using my little squares. So I'm painting with fabric rather than on fabric.
Jenny, I'm afraid we just have time for one more short image. Is there one you want to focus on of your slides?
This one will do. Oldonyo Lingai is, I'm very fond of depicting volcanoes. So I've done a huge series on volcanoes. In fact, the one you have is Pele 4. So this is the goddess of volcanoes, and she's not only a goddess of destruction, she's also a goddess of regeneration. So here you see, this is the volcano part, and here you see all the grey ash, which quickly degenerates and forms little pockets of where lichen can grow. Then the ferns can grow after that, and the trees can grow further to repopulate the land with vegetation.
Thank you so much, Jenny. This is so inspirational. It's amazing to see how your work has developed. And now I understand a lot more about the work that is in our exhibition. Thank you. Thank you. So Mary, I think we'll get ready to transition to you. One quick question, Jenny, what other things do you collect?
Oh, stones, leaves, feathers, glass,
Okay.
anything.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. Take it away, Mary.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a real honor to be included with these very talented artists. So thank you for inviting me to Textile Talks to speak about my work. And especially thank you to the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles for organizing all of this. The staff have been wonderful. Okay, my medium is unusual even in the fiber art world. Artworks made with cheesecloth. Go forward here, and of course, my computer has decided not to cooperate. We're all having technical problems today. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and come back to this and try it again.
It always happens when 525 people are watching, but that's not to make you nervous, Mary.
That's the only time, right? Okay, so share screen. Let's try this one. There we go. Let's hope this works. There we go. There's my medium right there in front of you. For me, when I'm creating art quilts, any textile is fair game. But when I was working with cheesecloth, I became fascinated with its compelling properties that you see listed here. And so 2 early pieces that I made for a regional Sakwa exhibit about a dozen years ago illustrated these properties. You can see here, I've held the cheesecloth down and stitched it. This is just dried cheesecloth, pulled it up and stitched it again. And I was really fascinated by it. So in this second piece, you'll notice that the cheesecloth almost has the appearance of a human form, especially when you rotate it. And if you can't see the human figure there, I've done a slide to help you a little bit. You should see the figure of an elderly man in baggy pants. So my quest for the elusive model in baggy pants turned up nothing except for this wonderful copyright-free photo by Chalmers Butterfield. And I made a loose rendering of the figure, which I then stitched to 2 pieces of linen. So I used black cheesecloth on the white side and the reverse on the other side. And then at that very time, Sakwa offered its first 1-foot square auction. And so I decided I would just do the head because I couldn't do the entire figure in just 12 inches. And the piece that I made caused quite a stir. So each subsequent piece that you will see shows how I begin to adapt and change this very early technique. I began making portraits adapted from photos of homeless people by Tennessee photographer Clint Colbert, with whom I struck up a wonderful online correspondence. These were value studies, white cheesecloth placed on black fabric to fully utilize chiaroscuro. I'll go back so you can take another look. And that is simply the effect of light and shadow. I framed them with burlap for the texture it added and the appropriateness for the subject matter. I began to incorporate color by dyeing the cheesecloth and by painting the background fabric that I had stitched the cheesecloth to. So that's Jane Goodall. And here are 2 more 1-foot square portraits that I donated to Sakwa in subsequent years for the 1-foot square auction. I explored subjects beyond just portraiture, and I began incorporating, here I've painted an ocean backdrop and I have mythological creatures, but I also did full-length human figures, birds, animals, anything that cheesecloth seemed appropriate for, and I've yet to come up with subject matter that I can't use it for. And I collage elements sometimes that are appropriate to the portrait. So in the case of, on the left-hand side, I have done some text from Leonard Cohen's poetry and songs. And I also have some corroded, the piece on the right side is called Corrosion, and I've wanted to indicate the sense of corrosion by burning some Lutradur for the effect of corroding steel for the homeless man on the right. And as I changed over the years, my pieces got bigger. I began going really large. All of the pieces that you see here are 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall, or 60 inches tall and 36 inches wide. And I also began to work faster. A solo show will do that to you. Fear is a great motivator. And in 2015, I made The Drifter, the one that's in this show. I chose him for his compelling and challenging gaze. And he has had, as you can see, an illustrious career traveling for many years. Because of COVID, he's traveling now more than I do. Here are some details from The Drifter, showing the layering of the cheesecloth. Sometimes very small pieces are stitched on. So sometimes black and white is appropriate for a portrait, and sometimes color is added to complete the story, as with Lighthouse Keeper and David Attenborough, who just missed out on his debut at Chicago Sofa this month due to COVID. My final slide brings us to my recent explorations, painting the subject's face with textile paints on fabric and adding cheesecloth only on textural areas like the hair, the beard, and his garment. This is Nisha, who is currently in a portrait exhibition in Australia that celebrates textile artists who have influenced us. And going forward, I have been working on some non-objective artworks with cheesecloth to continue to explore what I believe are the endless possibilities with a very humble textile. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's amazing. If you haven't, I have to say, if you haven't seen Mary's work in person, it's just astounding how she does use this really, I'm gonna start my video, unable, oh, host, can you start my video? There you go, thank you. It's amazing how she uses this really humble material of cheesecloth and just gets incredible, like The Drifter, to see the original photograph. Your work from it is so, the photograph doesn't add any more. The Drifter has so much meaning. It's so just amazing. So I encourage all of you who can see these works in person. It's truly amazing. I think the thing that has struck me about all the artists today, and other people have commented on this, but especially you, Mary, is how so many of the quilt artists really develop their own technique to really express what they want to express. And who would have thought cheesecloth? And you know, there's nobody who does it the way you do. Just one quick question. So it is hand stitched down. It's not glued.
No, I do everything by machine.
By machine. Okay,
and
okay.
because I use invisible thread, after I've stitched on all the cheesecloth, it is never being moved again. I'm not going to undo all that, you know, do a frog stitch with invisible thread.
Okay, no mistakes, no mistakes. Yes. So I don't have any other questions. Let's see. Okay, well, just some technical things. Charlotte, question for working with silk organza. Any suggestions for making it easier to work with? Unmute yourself. Charlotte, unmute yourself. Click your mute button.
Oh, I had, yes. Okay, sorry. Well, it is kind of difficult, especially when you move up to sizes like this, but actually, well, you know, it creases and you can't handle it very much. It's really difficult to find a way to pack it up for shipping, to be shipped around for touring exhibitions, but I think it's worth everything. Sometimes I do use water-soluble material to stabilize it, but not very often, though. But I can tell you that all the boats on the big quilts at the end were stitched on  material and then stitched onto the organza, because I mean, I would just hate doing the last boat in the sewing machine and then suddenly the organza would tear or something like that. So it felt safer to make the boats individually on water soluble and then stitch them on.
Right.
But I don't know what else to say about it. I decided that I didn't want to have any seams. I wanted it to be as light and airy as the silk organza is. So it's torn edges, not turned edges in any ways, or seamed edges. I don't know what else to say, really.
I think that's it. I think
great.
that's it. Yeah.
It's great to print on, it's great to discharge, and yeah.
Well, I think, again, when you work with materials that are experimental and not quilting cottons, I learned a term a couple of weeks ago from an artist who we had, Ryan Carrington, who was asked, he made a flag out of someone's wedding dress. And he said, if I knew what I knew now about sewing with lace and satin, I would do it differently. He said, but I just had to angry sew that for 2 weeks. And I thought sometimes we just have to angry sew. Anyway, I just want to thank all the artists so much for being with us all over the world, and all of the attendees. Thank you for coming today. As I said early on, this has been a real personal and professional milestone for me. And so it was great to meet you, Charlotte and Jenny, and to see you, Leslie and Mary, again. And thank you very much for working with us to make this happen. We just loved everything. So for those of you in the Bay Area, there's no excuse. You need to come and see Layered and Stitch, which is on view until January 2nd. And we've also put the artist websites in the chat. So be sure and follow them online. They have lots of work on their websites that is really inspiring. And again, I want to thank our sponsors for supporting this event, and remind everybody that we will be sharing this on YouTube and Facebook afterwards. It takes us a few days to do any editing we need to do, so don't look for it in the next hour or so. And again, please patronize these sponsors. They really make this possible for us to do. And if you enjoyed the talk and would also like to donate or become a member of the museum, please visit our website at sjquiltmuseum.org. And join us next Wednesday for our next presentation. And we look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.